Hi, today I want to talk to you about the financial model assumption book or guide. Sometimes financial models are accompanied by two other documents. One is the financial model assumption book and another one the financial model guide. The guide will show an overview of the model mechanics, functionalities, and make it easier for the user to understand how to work with the model. An assumption book is supposed to contain the model assumption and results and makes it easier to present the key model information. And sometimes both of them are combined into one separate document. So in this video tutorial and in the blog post, I want to show you how I do the guide and assumption books in my model. So basically what I do is that I include it as a worksheet, as a separate worksheet, dedicated worksheet within my own financial model, and it's going to make it easier to maintain it and update it. And if I want to send it to someone, I simply just print it as PDF and send it as a separate document. But the information is already included in my model and linked to the assumptions and the results, so I don't need to do extra work. The extra work is only done once when I'm creating that worksheet, and later when I want to send a different version of the model, I just need to either send it as the model, or just, as I said, print it as a PDF and send it separately. So before I get into the topic and I walk you through a typical project finance guide sheet within my models, for those of you who don't know me, hi, my name is Hedieh. I made financial modeling my profession as well as my passion. My goal here in YouTube is to make you a pro yourself or simply better at financial modeling. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, please consider subscribing to my channel. Okay, now let's get into the financial model. This is just a typical financial model. By opening the model, I can just navigate in between the different worksheets. And as you can see, these two worksheets that are colored in blue, most probably they contain the assumptions and all the hard-coded assumptions within the model. And these two worksheets are mainly the output sheets, and the remaining worksheets are basically calculation sheets, okay? And this is containing the checks within the model. And for somebody, and then, just if I go to the summary sheet, on the top I see that there is a run macro. So if that I see that here I see some errors, or then I know that maybe I need to run this macro. So this is because I'm already familiar with this kind of structure, so it's easy for me to understand how to operate with the model. But you have to consider, for someone who's not familiar with how to operate a standard financial model, then you need to basically explain it to the user, okay? That's why, and that's the whole purpose of having a guide sheet. That's why I have, as I said, within my model, I have this worksheet called guide. And I tell the user how they can operate using the model. So the first section of this guide sheet deals with the color codes. So as you can see, all these are the color codes that I use in the model. But to be honest with you, the most important one is this one, which is the blue font and light yellow shaded cells basically contain all the hard-coded inputs. And as I told you, within these two worksheets, these are the cells that I can change. As you can see, even the user can even change the labels. And basically that's the main thing, that you need. However, I think it's also useful to kind of put the other color codes as well. But this is mainly important if somebody else is gonna inherit the model, then they know that if they want to make changes, and then it's good to keep the same formatting when it comes to color codes. So, and then the next section talks about the model functionality. So as I told you, because I'm already familiar with this model and with this type of models in general, I know how to operate. But for someone who's not familiar, you need to explain to them what they need to do, what are the steps to make changes if they want to operate with the model. For example, in this model, I have my input sheet, which is structured in in scenario format, so that the user can change and navigate in between different scenarios by using a switch, and you can basically define different scenarios. And you need to explain this to the user, because somebody who is not familiar doesn't know how to use the switch, what the switch is used for. So that's why I explain it all here, that this is the switch and you define your scenario here, and then you just need to basically change the switch to navigate in between different scenarios. And then I also tell them if there are any macros and any buttons that they need to press. That's what I tell them, that every time that you change something, you need to come to the summary sheet and press the button. I also put the run macro button on the top of each worksheet as well. So these are the things that I explain here. In your models, it might be different. You might not have any macros, you might not have any buttons. However, you want to tell your users if they change the inputs, how they can change the inputs, and if they change it, are there any other steps that they need to take. And then there is also, I explain them about the sensitivities as well, because I have a worksheet for sensitivities. So I tell them exactly how they can populate the sensitivity output table by pressing this button, and by changing this assumption, they can define their own sensitivity analysis. So all these needs to be defined in this guide sheet. As you can see here, this is a snapshot from the financial model, so in the image format, with some notes explaining where to press and what to do. Okay, so that's about the section about the model functionality, which is very useful. The other section is about the column structure, because as you know, in all standard financial models, if you navigate in between the different worksheets within the model, all of them should have the same basically column structure. So if you look at these ones, all of them, as you can see here, they start, for example, in January 2001. The next one will be also January. So and then I have this column H, which is dedicated for the sum total of the row. This is dedicated for constants, which I am importing from another sheet, and this column F is for units. So all of these is explained here. As you can see here is explained how what each column represent in the worksheet, in the calculation sheets within the model. The next section, which is very useful, is to tell the users the number of worksheets, and in the form of flowcharts and also table. I prefer to do both. So in this one, as you can see visually, when you look at it, you know exactly, you can see exactly what are the worksheets included in the model. And in the table below, I also put an explanation for each worksheet and what it contains. Okay. And I separate them between preliminary sheets, input sheets, calculation sheets, and output sheets. And I color code them differently. And as you have seen in the first section, I also put the color code used for the tabs. The next section is basically macros. So if you have any macros included in your model, you need to also define it in this section under macros. For example, in this worksheet, I have a couple of copy and paste macros, simple ones. So I just put that I have this macro in the model, and this is just, and I explain what it does and why I needed to include a macro within the model. It's, for example, here it was a copy and paste to resolve the circular reference caused in the sources and uses of funds. In your model, it might be different. You might not have it, or if you have it, you make sure to put an explanation so that the model auditor or the user know exactly what are the codes included in the model. As I explained in a separate blog post and video, and I also have a template for it explaining the number of typical checks that you need to include in a typical project finance model, you also need to explain to the users that I included these checks in the model. These checks make sure that if you changed your inputs, the inputs are changed. You make sure that everything is working properly. And you can define the checks and put an explanation, as I said, for each check. And here as well, in this model, I have this worksheet called checks. and I make sure that when I run different sensitivities and different scenarios, all of these are satisfied. And if not, on top of each worksheet, I have this flag which will tell the user if something is wrong. So in the guide sheet as well, you wanna make sure that you list all the checks. And you also tell the users that, at the end you have this consolidated check, which is on top of each worksheet. And mostly you define it here when you're talking about how to operate the model. You tell them that if something is wrong, you need to run the macro first. And if it doesn't sort out the problem, then you need to dive deeper and see where the problem is coming from, okay? Abbreviations, yes, for us, we are used to, we talk about CFADS, we talk about DSRA, we talk about OPEX and everything, and we think that everybody should be familiar with these terms. And we use them as well in our financial models, thinking that, everybody, whoever is using it should be familiar. But like, as I always say, a project finance model or a financial model in general is like any other project documents. And in all the project documents that you see, if you're using any abbreviation, most of the time you have on top of the in the table of contents somewhere, you have all the explanation of these definitions. So you do the same thing here. If you're using any abbreviation, you explain them here in this section, and you keep track of all of them in this section. Okay, now we are done with what we call the model functionalities, and we get into the assumption book or the data book. So the aim here, as I told you, is to have a section within your financial model which contains the key inputs and outputs of the model. So for example, if I am an investment officer and I have most of the time, they have a section in their project documents when they want to present a document to their boards for the appraisal. They have a section for the financial model, and in that section they want to kind of present the maybe sometimes it's in the annex or it's in the body of the project document. They want to present the key model assumptions and results. So it's going to be easy for them to just copy and paste this section into their document and present it as the summary financial model assumptions and results. So that's the main aim of this section. As I said, the aim is not to make any calculation based on these inputs. They should not be hard-coded. They should just be linked to the model inputs and outputs. And it's just for presentation purpose only, okay? So most of the time, these are the sections that I include in my assumption sheet, or in the assumption book, in this section of the guide sheet. So I include a paragraph about the timing assumption, and I also report the key dates like the financial close date and the operation start date and the duration of the operations or projections. So I include a table. As you can see, all of them are linked to the input sheet, and then I explain a little bit about the timeline. The next section is about the project cost and financing plan. Most of the time I already have this section in my dashboard under sources, summary, sources and uses. So I can also report it here, and I can explain what are the project costs during construction, financing and physical costs, and how they're going to be funded, with which financing instrument, debt and equity, or whatever are the instruments that are available for the project. And what is a good practice is to also put some text together with links to the model, so that, as you can see here I'm reporting the total project cost is estimated at $168 million. Okay, so as you can see here, this is linked to this table, and if, for example, tomorrow I need to change the total project cost, I need to increase capex or decrease capex, then this is going to be updated automatically. So even you can use a combination of text and links to cells by using just quotations. You just put the text into the brackets, and then that's it, you're done. What I always recommend is that when you're reporting figures and numbers, always put them use the round function, because if I don't have it, for example, if I don't have it, as you can see, it's going to look ugly with digits. So it's a good practice to just put them use the round function, and then you're going to have like a clean phrase. It's like that can be copy pasted in any document. Of course, you need to, this is of course differs from project to project, but you need to have a section about how the project makes money, meaning the revenue calculation. So you have like the price times quantity. You explain a little bit about tariff, and you explain a little bit about quantity as well. Price times quantity gives you revenue. So these are the things that you need to explain, either in form of table or text together with links to your model. You can explain how the project is making money. Operating expenses, you might have lots of detail in your input sheet for calculating operating expenses, but here, as you know, this is just for reporting purposes, so it needs to be clean and not much detailed. Okay, so you just put a reasonable breakdown of your operating expenses. Same thing stands for the capex or any other expenses as well. So you put the breakdown of your operating expenses, and you can report it on annual basis. Just say that, you know, each of these categories, how much they cost per annum. Okay, so that can be a good table to present and summarize the operating expenses. And of course, if you have any debt instruments, you also want to put the key debt terms like the interest rates, any fees, commitment fees, and the amounts of maximum commitment, tenor, and the grace period. So these are the things that you can report and can be useful for the user. They can report it in their project documents. Next section is about commercial viability. Of course, the whole purpose of a financial model is to come up with the commercial viability. So you can, as I said again, with using some text and links to cell, you can basically report the main metrics that you have already calculated in your model. Most probably you have it in your dashboard, in your summary sheet. You have all these debt metrics and, you know, equity return metrics. You can also report them here. And so for someone who is busy and doesn't want to, you know, you can just copy and paste it into their own project document. And the last one is the sensitivity analysis. As you know, all the above sections, they need to reflect the base case. Okay, so when you are printing this sheet, or if you are copy and pasting from it, you make sure that you are on the base case, or you're on the case that you want to report. And of course, you also need to, it's useful to have sensitivities, because a financial model without sensitivity, it's not very useful. Most of the time we need to have this sensitivity analysis, and it's very easy to include the sensitivity into a financial model. I have a template that you can easily just copy and insert it into your models. I'm going to put the link down below for you as well. And that's it. So as you can see here, that's the guide sheet that I have in almost all my models. Sometimes I only include definitely I will have this first section, which is the mechanical check. And sometimes I don't have this section with the model assumptions, because I already have these, everything is already in the model, so the user can look. However, I still think it's a good practice, because as I told you, it is good for people who wanna just copy and paste it and report it in their own project documents. So I think I covered everything that I wanted to cover about the guide sheet. I'm really looking forward to hear your feedback about this, whether you include already this in your models or do you use it as a separate worksheet. I'm sure there are some other fancy ways of updating a document in parallel with Excel and do all this kind of macros and stuff. But I mean, to me, this method has worked for me for years now. I actually when I wanted to prepare for this, I remember that I did this while back. It was when Koenig, that now is in Gridline, he used to be with the F1, F9. He started this very beautiful work with the Financial Modeling Handbook, the Collaborative and Crowdfund Financial Modeling Guide. And I contributed to some of the chapters, and I started that actually back in 2015. So as you can see here, since 2013, I started applying this, adding the guide sheet within my models, and it has been very useful. And so many times just having this worksheet within the model has avoided so many of these initial model walkthrough calls where you have to explain to the user how to operate the model. You can just simply tell them to go and look at this worksheet and see, and if they still have a question and need a model walkthrough, of course you can have a session with them, but that's going to help the user, and also the financial model is going to save some time for both parties. Okay, that's it. I think I'm done. I hope to see you in my next video. Thank you. Bye. If you want to learn how to build better financial models, check out my online course on financial model spreadsheet design at courses.phoenixmode.com.